The Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by Reaper Apparel Company. Reaper Apparel offers a casual line of superb fit, finish, and comfort. We design for those who refuse to die slowly and choose to live untamed. For those who aren't afraid to face the dark, for the ones that thrive in it, and for those who can appreciate life through a grim lens. That's Reaper Apparel Company. Go to the link in the description of this episode, use the promo code Mike Bono, and get 10% off. Also, the Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by my own personal merch store, the Stupid Should Hurt merch store. I have hats, I have t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, water bottles, notebooks, you name it, I've got it. The description and the link for that will be in the description of this episode. Also, right now, if you use the promo code WELCOME, I will give you 5% off of your first purchase. That's the Stupid Should Hurt merch store. Also, the Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by Tactical Brotherhood, all American-made apparel, which helps support the Second Amendment. You can also find all this in the description of this episode with the link, Tactical Brotherhood. Part of every proceed does go to helping veterans, as it is a very good cause. All American-made products made right here in Minnesota. Go and check them out. Use the promo code PATRIOT15 to get 15% off your purchase. Now, let's start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Ride Home Rants. I'm your special guest, Fitty, and I'm filling in today for the host with the most, Mike Bono, as he enjoys some quality time off for the next few episodes. Today, we have a really great guest for you who comes from a great football background. But first, I want to talk about a little bit of our sponsors. You heard a lot of our sponsors in the pre-roll recording before this, but we got two new sponsors as well. One of them is W Energy. W Energy is energy drinks made for gamers, streamers, and podcasters by gamers, streamers, and podcasters alike. W is formulated to give you the focus and energy with no jitters or crash. Use the promo code Mike Bono for 10% off. Also, another sponsor that we recently had is Shank It Golf. Shank It Golf is made for the everyday golfer who may not shoot a 6 under par, but they may shoot a 6 over par. Golf is supposed to be fun, and Shank It Golf makes it fun with their different apparel and the items that they have. Make sure you check them out today. Also use the promo code Mike Bono for 15% off. With the sponsors being out of the way, I'd love to introduce our next guest of the show to all our new listeners and to all our current listeners, Coach Bill Conley. Excuse me, I almost burped when I said that. I hold myself in. Coach, thanks for coming on to the show. Coach Conley, you come from a very, very extensive background in sports, so we are really excited to talk about that with you today. But thank you for joining us here on Ride Home Rants.
Well, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this, and hopefully share some stories and things about some experiences that I've had. So really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. You know, first and foremost, a good guest of the show whose show is in the top 5 all-time downloads, Ernest Wilson, recommended you and spoke about you very highly. So what's your relationship with Ernest, and how long have you known him for?
Well, I've known Ernest for really only a couple of years, but he's involved with Major League Football as I am. He's the head coach of the Arkansas team. I'm the head coach of the Ohio team. And I really just first got to meet him in person at some clinics and things like that, but really got to know him last year when we had our first practices with Major League Football down in Mobile, Alabama.
Okay, yeah, Ernest is a great guy, very well connected, has helped out the show here a lot with guests, and comes from a very extensive background. I remember one of the first times I talked to him, I didn't realize until I looked at his bio that he was on the 1990 Allegheny Gators championship team in the Division III level and coached with Joe Philbin, who everybody knows. Joe Philbin went on to a great NFL career as a head coach and an assistant coach. So Ernest, he's great. He knows a lot of people. That guy definitely shows what the coaching realm is all about with no one.
He's a good man, very good man.
Definitely. So, Coach, we want to kind of, start off the show here. You know, you're an Ohio guy and a Columbus guy through and through. We want to talk about your starting your career at Ohio State as a football player. So, how did you wind up getting recruited by them, and what was your recruiting process like? Can you kind of start with that with us?
Yeah, mine's a little different story. Of course, I went to high school here in Columbus, and so I wanted to be a Buckeye. I had a good high school career, successful high school career, but I really wasn't recruited by big Division I's. But I wanted to play at Ohio State, so really I walked on initially. We started off with somewhere around 120, 130 walk-on players. Then that was cut down basically by the staff. They had to, because of academic reasons, they cut some people. And so now we're down to about half that number. When it's all said and done, after about a year in the program, only 3 of us out of that whole group ended up on the team, and I ended up being put on scholarship. So, great experience coaching or playing for Coach Hayes. And, he was my inspiration to go into coaching. I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I started college, but like many people do. Besides, the great success we had at Ohio State, the great coaches we had, and really Coach Hayes' leadership, that was my inspiration.
Yeah, not too many people say they played or coached with Coach Woody Hayes, but what was he like as a coach? Was he a demanding coach? Was he a player's coach? Was he a little bit of everything? What was that like as a player playing for him in your relationship?
Well, first of all, very demanding on the field. It was business at hand. You were out there on a practice field to get the job done. And Woody was a hands-on coach. Everybody knows that. And he was, required everybody to give their best every practice. And he was, if he will lose his temper, you don't want him to lose his temper at you because, you'd suffer the consequences. But really, off the field, a great man, a tremendous, tremendous person. Did more for people, for former players, and people associated with the program that, was unspoken, unheard of. A lot of people think Woody was just this big tyrant type of a guy, and he was not that at all. If he yelled at you during practice, he made sure before you left the facility, he'd pat you on the back, and, that was his way of making up for yelling at you. But off the field, he was a guy who made speeches, never took any money. But right toward the end of his career, he started taking some money. And that was a surprise on us. We ended up, he was with an equipment manager that was dying of cancer. And his insurance had ran out and didn't have any money, so he would sign those checks over to the family. He never spent it on himself at all. So those are stories Woody probably wouldn't want you to know. But he was a great man, a great person. One of the stories about Woody, I was recruiting down in West Palm Beach, Florida. I go into a high school, and I had my Ohio State shirt on. And the principal of the high school came out. He said, "Hey, you're from Ohio State." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Come here, I want to talk to you." He said, Woody came to this school about 10 years ago, and he wanted to talk to one of our players, and his brother, his twin brother, played. And they weren't going to be out of school till, 3 o'clock or so he had to wait. And he said, "That's fine." Well, he just happened to be walking down the hallway, and it was a history class being taught. It just happened to be about World War II. So Woody walked in the classroom, sat in the back, and of course the teacher recognized him. Students didn't know who he was. And so he gets finished doing his lecture, and he says, "Coach Hayes, would you like to add anything to this?" Well, yeah, I guess I would. Mm-hmm. So he stood up and started talking to the class. Pretty soon, teachers are coming in, sitting down, listening, and the whole school and people lined up outside the classroom. He says, "Unbelievable." And he did that for about 2 hours, and then talked to the players afterwards. But that's the type of guy Woody was.
Sure. That's some pretty good stories right there. Probably most people don't know about him unless they were associated with the Buckeyes. So, Coach, what are some of your more memorable games and moments from your playing career there? We'll talk about your coaching career in a little bit, but as a player, what are some of your more memorable moments on the field and some of the games you played in?
Well, I think, first of all, it's always the Michigan games, the first ones you think about. Now, as a freshmen were eligible to play. We were at the game, but we just sat with the team. That's, of course, when we won the national championship. We beat, I think, Michigan 50-12 or something like that, and went on and won the Rose Bowl, beat Southern Cal, who had O.J. Simpson. So that was a great one. Now, I got to say this. Unfortunately, the next year we lost up in Ann Arbor. So that was a bad experience. We were number one in the nation, had a big winning streak. But the good ones, the next year in Columbus, we got them back. We've been 20-9 in Ohio Stadium. The students tore down the goalposts, marching down the state capitol about 5 miles down the road, and put them on the lawn of the State House. And that was a great experience. So those were probably the three highlight games.
Yeah, there's not too many people who can say they played against O.J. Simpson when he was at USC. So very, very historic running back there for people that don't know OJ's football career between his time at USC and when he was with the Bills and the Electric Company as the offensive line, and that's how he got the nickname the Juice. So a lot of stuff just brought back when you were talking about OJ with his historic football career.
Listen, we had some great players during that time too. You talk about Jack Tatum, the greatest hitter of all time. You talk about guys like Rex Kern, great athletic quarterback, Jim Stillwagon, a great middle guard, and you can go on and on. There's so many great players, on the field at that time.
And I think people that don't know the physicality of football back then, they think football is physical now. They should really pop in at Jack Tatum highlight film and watch what Jack Tatum did to people, not only in college, but the NFL. But those are the rules. I know Jack Tatum is not liked in a lot of circles with what happened with Darryl Stingley, but I don't blame that on Jack Tatum. That was the rules of the day, and those are the chances, unfortunately, you took. But Jack Tatum playing the NFL now, he might be thrown out of the NFL with the level.
Probably so. But the amazing thing about Jack Tatum too, in high school he was a great offensive player too. He could have been a running back. I know we used to scrimmage every month of April. We'd practice 6 days a week, and every Saturday we'd have a scrimmage. And the one spring, every scrimmage we had, Jack Tatum intercepted a pass and took it back for a touchdown. I don't know if people were afraid to tackle him or they couldn't catch him or what it was. But he was something. He was just a great athlete.
Yeah, and people, when you're listening to this and you've never seen Jack Tatum, he played for the Raiders on John Madden on the Super Bowl teams. Him and George Atkinson were the two safeties. If you watch some of his highlights, especially the one against the Vikings, where he literally hits the Vikings receiver and the receiver hangs on to the ball, but his helmet explodes off his head. His helmet goes one way, the chin strap goes the whole other way. The assassin, Jack Tatum. So a lot of good memories right there from watching stuff when I was younger, Coach.
Yeah.
So you finish at Ohio State as a player. You start going to your role of an adult and coaching. So can you kind of walk through, your time as an assistant with the Buckeyes or what you did right after college, and then how you went to the various stops along the way?
Yeah. One thing I had to make a decision when I graduated was to go the GA route and coach college football or go into high school. I decided I was going to high school coaching. So I took a job at a small high school outside Columbus. And on the second year, the head coach retired. And I got the head coaching job. And I was only 23 years old. I was the youngest guy on the staff. And I was the head coach. So we had a lot of success there. Then after I left that job, I went to a high school in the southeast part of Columbus and coached there for a few years. Then Middletown, Ohio. Went to Middletown and had a great experience there because I had this young guy that he didn't know if he was going to keep playing football. He was going to be a junior, and his brother was a pro basketball player. And so he talked like he wasn't going to play football. And so we put on a little camp that summer when we got the job, my staff. And we knew this guy looked awful good, awful athletic. We were moving a weight machine one time from a middle school to the high school. And I looked at him and I said, can you get up on the dock there and help us balance it up on top? Now, this was about 38-inch, difference. And all of a sudden, 2 feet, boom, jumped on top of the dock. I thought he was going to take the steps around. I said, what is this? I looked at one of the other coaches and I said, this is not an ordinary human being. So I kept talking to him. I said, now, Chris, I know you don't know for sure what you want to do, but I said, give this junior year a chance, and then you'll have a choice, maybe football and basketball, so forth. Okay, Coach, well, that was Chris Carter. And everybody knows the rest of the story. Of course, his senior year, he was All-State, All-American, both football and basketball. And he was actually had the chance he could have gone to Louisville on a basketball scholarship, but he also visited Ohio State, visited Michigan, visited Notre Dame, and he was going to visit Southern Cal. But the coach ended up getting stranded in Chicago. Big snowstorm set in. So he ended up not taking the Southern Cal visit. He said, Coach, really, I decided I want to go to Ohio State anyway. And I said, well, that did break my heart. So, of course, he goes to Ohio State. And the funny thing, of course, the next year I go to Ohio State because Earl Bruce, I had played for him. He was my position coach at Ohio State. So ended up there. Guess where we ended up after the season? In the Rose Bowl. Guess who we're playing? Southern Cal. That coach walked up, and me and Chris were talking before the game. He says, guess I should have waited and got another plane. But, it's funny how things work out. Of course, from Middletown, I go to Ohio State, which is unusual in a sense, but not unusual in Ohio State lores of coaching history. If you look, a lot of good coaches at Ohio State came from the high school ranks. Earl Bruce was a great coach from Massillon, and going on and on. So traditional, about every third coach, Woody would hire a high school coach, and Earl kind of kept that going too. And so it was a great experience. Was there for 4 years, and of course, you know what happened after the Clemson game. Earl got fired. I went back into high school coaching, and then John Coop became the head coach. And in 1991, he called me and said, I really would like you to come back to Ohio State and be our recruiting coordinator and so forth. I did. And then next year, got back on the field too as defensive end coach and recruiting coordinator. And I kept the recruiting coordinator through that whole time span. And then with Coach Tressel, ended up with Coach Tressel, who had been on the staff as an assistant my first time with Earl Bruce. And so I was on Jim's staff, and we won the national championship, beat Miami, greatest game I've ever coached in. And then next year I stayed for another Fiesta Bowl. And then I decided I was going to try something else. I went to Coach Tressel, and I said, Jim, I want to try to do some other things, but I might want to come back someday. He said, anytime you want to come back, you just call. So I ended up leaving Ohio State and had several jobs, media jobs, radio, television. And also I got a job with ESPN. I was with Tom Luganville and Craig Halbert, Billy Tucker, and we're the guys that came up with the ESPN at that time, the 150, top 150 high school players in the country. So we'd travel around the country, go to the Nike and Under Armour combines, and do some television work in the fall. And that was a lot of fun. And all of a sudden I get a call one day from a guy who I know who had been my car dealer way back in Ohio State. He ended up getting out of the car business, became an athletic director. And he was the athletic director of Ohio Dominican, which is at that time an NAI school here in Columbus. He said, you want to be our head coach? I said, are you kidding me? I just was out 6 days in Hawaii at Nike and Under Armour combines. It was a great time. Why would I want to leave this business and do that? Well, of course, he talks to me 2 days later. I take the job. And so the funny thing, I find out, well, they're going to jump into Division II. I said, oh, God. I said, so I got to take an NAIA school, make it to Division II in 1 year. And but with some good athletes, we struggled a little bit the first year, but right after that, we had a big winning streak. We had the longest Division II winning streak in the country. We made the playoffs a couple times, beat arch rival Grand Valley State, who had won a bunch of national championships, beat them a couple of times. And so that was a good experience. But as what happens in Division II, after 6 years, financially, the schools, especially in Ohio, they're private. And, it's high tuition. There's not a lot of money. And so they want me to sign I believe my third contract. And I said, hey, listen, if college scholarships are going to be cut and I can't have an opportunity to win the national championship, that was not the deal when I came here. So ended up leaving there and, back doing some radio, television work. And then we're trying to get this Major League Football off the ground, which is a great thing. Hopefully that'll happen. So I've been doing this a long time, and just goes to prove too many concussions, don't know when to quit.
Well, Coach, you talked about a lot of good things there, and I kind of want to go back to a little bit of your time at Ohio State and touch upon a few other things. But if I'm not mistaken, for the diehard football fans out there, you would have been the recruiting coordinator for people like David Boston, Andy Katzenmoyer, Maurice Claret, some of those Ohio State legends. People probably remember.
And a couple of Heisman Trophy winners, Eddie George and Troy Smith.
Troy Smith and a couple other guys. I always tell people, if you want to know what like 1990s and 2000 footballs looked like, especially the younger guys, go look up a picture of Andy Katzenmoyer with his horse collar and those big gigantic shoulder pads and the gloves and just full of mud and dirt. That is what I think what a throwback football player looks like. But can you kind of talk about recruiting those guys and what that entailed, especially because they were such high-level players?
Yeah, well, the thing, first of all, Ohio State traditionally had not went out of state a lot. A few times you get some great players in the past, a lot from New Jersey, some from Florida. But we knew we had to expand our recruiting base. And Florida became a big area and stuff like that. So we basically just worked our butts off. At that time, you only had one recruiting coordinator. You didn't have a recruiting staff or anything like that. And so my job was to assign each coach to recruiting areas. And, of course, I oversaw the whole thing. I had my own recruiting area, too, as well as coaching my position. So it was a lot of work, hard work. Bottom line is just, I got the coaches down. I said, listen, here's the thing. To be a great recruiter, you've got to be able to establish a close relationship with the guys you're recruiting. In other words, the whole thing is make it tough for them to say no. I recruited South Florida, and when I recruited my players, I told them this. I said, no, I don't know if you're going to start at Ohio State or not, but if you're not going to come here, you're going to tell me face to face. I'll fly down. You're going to look and tell me the reasons why. Now, you'd be surprised how many people don't want you to do that. Don't want to do that. So it's just about it's establishing relationship. It's selling your program, selling your head coach. And is burning the midnight away. And then in Columbus, you sell the community too. It's a great city. So that was what we did. All our mailings and our phone calls centered around all those things.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great aspect of what recruiting was, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, compared to, what it is now, where you guys kind of did everything as coaches, and now they have whole recruiting support staffs to also, tie in and help out with the actual coaches itself and the analysts and things of that nature. So a lot of good information there for the listeners out there. You got a chance to coach on that national championship team against some very, very great Miami players and Hall of Fame Miami players. Can you kind of talk about the preparations for that game? Because most football fans, diehard college football fans, will say those Miami teams were some of the greatest football teams probably ever assembled, from, Ed Reed, Willis McGahee, and Ken Dorsey, and the whole way down the line of tons and tons, Bryant McKinney, first-round draft picks and later-round draft picks. Can you kind of talk about what that experience was like coaching against those teams?
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of those guys you just mentioned, I recruited. And so, that is interesting. You see them on the football field. But, they're a great team, especially at that time. That was Miami. They were the team. And they did a great job of keeping their best players in state, and especially if they're in Miami and also in Broward County and Palm Beach County. I mean, they pretty much owned that part of the state. A lot of good players. Now, the fortunate thing in the whole deal, I was able to recruit a pretty good guy out of Fort Lauderdale, too. His name was Chris Gamble. And Chris Gamble, if you probably know this, but in a national championship game against Miami, he played 124 snaps. He played offense, defense, and he was involved. He was a return guy in the kicking game, too. So that was neat. But those guys from Miami were so good. But we go out to California, of course, and you turn on the television, listen on the radio. not who was going to win the game, but how much were they going to win by. And it was all those things. And Buckeyes don't like to hear that stuff day in and day out, day in and day out. And as a matter of fact, we found a small brochure that they were making, talking about where they're going to have their party after their next national championship win. Somehow, I don't know how, but it got copied. And our players ended up with a copy of that. So, and that really made it bad. But we worked really hard. The kids were fired up. They were motivated. An interesting thing about that is that, you get ready to go to the game. And, I mean, those guys had the look, and they really did, that they won the game. But we knew we had a chance. Here's the reason why. Two things happened during those practices out in California in Arizona for the bowl game. Number one is that our scout team really did a great job. Guys weren't going to play, redshirt guys, things like that, but they're out there to practice and things like that, which is kind of amazing. And you knew they were doing good because, you know what? The starters got mad at them. So when your starters are mad at your scout team, that's a pretty good thing going. And so that was one thing. The second thing, to a player, the guys put in a lot of extra film time on their own. And we demand a lot as coaches, obviously. But, the guys take a couple hours off in the early evening, but they come back into a man. Matt Wilhelm will take the linebackers in and watch some extra film. Craig Krenzel will take the receivers and quarterbacks in and they'd watch extra film. And to a position, even the specialists, Mike Nugent would take the specialists in and watch specialist film. And I'll tell you what, they were as prepared could be. And one of the funny stories I like to tell is when the game starts, I'm out there because I got some special teams I do too. And this pregame and the crowd's going crazy. And I look out in the crowd and it's almost all scarlet and gray. It's supposed to be a 50-50 game. And it's probably at least 75% Ohio State fans and 25% Miami fans. Well, I find out there's a reason why. Because Miami, because everybody thought they were going to win, had trouble selling a lot of tickets. And so they had a deal. They put in the paper that if you buy a membership to the Booster Club, you can buy tickets to the national championship game. Well, they didn't realize how many former Buckeyes live in South Florida. And they were buying up the tickets. They joined the Booster Club and then just to get the tickets. So we had a crazy advantage in the crowd. So it's a unique game. And going down the wire, everything you write in a book.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up some names there, and I'm a Jets fan. So, Mike Nugent was drafted by the Jets second round, one of the highest, at that time, highest picks for a kicker outside of the first round. Mike Nugent went on to have a good career with the Jets and ultimately with the Bengals. And talk about a little bit about Chris Gamble. I remember watching Chris Gamble. I remember he went to the Panthers, and they were unsure of what position to play him in, whether he was an NFL DB or he was an NFL receiver. I think he kind of settled, on receiver there. And I remember listening or watching that game over 20 years ago for Ohio State and Miami, and they talked about how smart Craig Krenzel was. Yeah. I believe he was like some type of engineering major, and he was just brilliant. I mean, they said just like molecular engineering, something of that nature, and was just one of the most brilliant people they've ever just had conversations with. So can you kind of talk about also, the talent you guys had on that team and how when the NFL guys start coming around, scouts and things of that nature, and kind of how it went with having those high caliber players, on your team being exposed national level and then the NFL coming around. How do you balance keeping those guys humbled in that sense?
Well, it's a little easier back then. You didn't have the NIL going on and all those things. The transfer rules different. But our players, first of all, because I said we went to more of a national look at that time. We had a lot of good Ohio players, obviously, but we had like Will Smith down in New York. It was a tremendous defensive end. And Craig Krenzel out of Michigan. Michael Jenkins out of Florida. So we got guys that were, really top caliber athletes. But the thing about it was Jim Tressel did a really good job, an excellent job of keeping our players focused. He didn't allow anybody to get too big, but there was nobody too small either. He did a great job of making a lot of the players who didn't even play feel an important part of it. As a matter of fact, one thing he did I think was great. After the game was over, we come back to close, and we have a team meeting. He passed out a sheet of paper. And he says, I want you to write down, I believe there's 5 reasons why we won the national championship that doesn't take any talent. I don't talk about speed, receiving ability, coverage ability, reasons we won that took no physical talent at all. And so things came up, camaraderie, teamwork, discipline, leadership, those types of things. So he was really a psychologist of a coach, I think, and did a masterful job of that.
And it brings up a good point. The guy I played for in college, Coach Tim Weaver, he coached kind of all over the place, position coach Wayne Corbett at Hofstra and some other different places. He used to say, and I took this into my time as a coach for, especially as a head coach for my couple of years, is he said, everybody on the team has a role. Whether you're the best guy or the worst guy, everybody has a role on the team. And ultimately, it takes from the best guy to the worst guy to make wins happen. And what you just said with Coach Tressel with that, kind of what Coach Weaver would say, and it's something I used to say too. Everybody has a role, whether you're the best scout team player or you're the best film guy that breaks things down to the star player on the team, or you make the best jokes, or, you keep everybody loose, or you're the strongest guy on the team. Whatever it is, everybody has a role. And without that role, you can't be successful. So I think what Coach Tressel said is, very, very true. You got to have everybody buy in from every level, and that's hard, right? That's hard, and that's hard from guys that play scout team and can never see the field at any level. It's hard to get guys like that to buy in and stay with the program. But as what you're saying, it seems like Coach Tressel got those guys to do that.
Matter of fact, one thing he did, which I thought was unique, before this season started in the spring, Coach Tressel passed out a book, Expanding Your Horizons, which is, and you're telling your players, hey, you're going to read this book and give a book report on it when you come back to camp. I mean, that's not what college seniors and juniors want to hear. But what it was a book written about the 1942 Ohio State National Championship team, which was coached by Paul Brown. Okay? And ended up being a very similar story. It was all over, but they weren't picked to be very good in 1942. And they ended up winning the national championship. Well, each chapter on that book, and the book was written by a former player on that team, was about the individual. Each chapter was one of the individual players. And the whole thing was they were a success on the football field, but they're also a success in life. I mean, a lot of great individuals. Chuck Surrey's one of them. He's a guy who started computer graphics, and he's a guy that students did Shrek and Jurassic Park and all this stuff. He was a member of that team. Well, and so the players had to give a report. He assigned each player a chapter. I'm talking about upperclassmen, primarily seniors, that they have to get up and tell the whole team about this particular guy. Well, after the first couple book reports, we'll say, vocal book reports, which took about 10 minutes, then you realize what Jim was trying to get across is that, listen, your part, you can be something special like these guys were. They weren't expected to be very good. And then the great thing was a guy named C. Grant was our teams from New Philadelphia, Ohio. And C. Grant, had played some linebacker, there's some DB, and linebacker. He never was a starter until going into that year when he had settled at the will linebacker spot. And then he would stand up, the players would stand up at the end of these meetings in the evening after we went over the film, practice and everything, and then the guys would give their book reports on their player. He would stand up and everybody stand up, and he would lead in the singing of the alma mater. Now, a lot of places, college players don't even know what the alma mater is. So sure, they're learning the alma mater. And the amazing thing is after all this, our players get better, better and better, won a lot of close games. and win a national championship, the guy who made forced incomplete pass the last play of the national championship game, C. Grant, coming off the edge and forced Dorsey to throw it incomplete. Now, you can write a movie better about that. So I all went back to that. I take that back to that spring when Jim passed out those books to the guys.
Yeah, no, that's definitely awesome. That is something that's kind of movie made for TV, made for a movie. We'll kind of leave it.
Yeah, Rudy style.
Yeah, absolutely, Rudy style for sure. Coach, I want to get your opinion on this, and you've been around, high caliber football. Kind of talking about the state of Ohio. We've seen Ohio State play Toledo. We've seen Ohio State play Youngstown State. Teams like that, the smaller Division Ones. Why don't you think, and because I don't remember this ever happening, Ohio, like the University of Ohio University, and Ohio State don't play, with not being that far away from another, and also having, both teams with the name Ohio in it. Is there any reason why the Bobcats and the Buckeyes aren't playing?
Well, I think primarily, if you look back historically, way back, before any of us were around, they did play those teams sometimes, even when teams were Division threes now,
Sure.
so forth. But then it became a situation where, of course, you wanted to play your toughest competition, make it to a bowl game, and originally it was just a Rose Bowl, all you could go to Ohio State. But so you had to get some good victories, some big name victories. I think that was a lot to do with it. But then the things changed when they started the playoff, changed the whole thing. Well, to make it to the playoffs, you had to win so many games. And so you had basically 6 games you had to win and stuff to make the playoffs. Well, if you take a couple smaller schools you should beat, then that helps you get a couple of wins. Might be the difference between making or not making it to the playoffs. And now, of course, they say it helps those schools out too financially, which it does. Any of those MAC schools or whatever that plays Ohio State will make more, even coming to Columbus, then they'll make their whole season combined. So, it's a give and take both ways.
Yeah, I was just always curious about that. I think a game like that would bring just good recognition. It's Ohio versus Ohio State, and same thing in Pennsylvania where they have a little bit, but like Penn State and Pitt, I think that was great for the state of Pennsylvania. And those two teams should play all the time. But it's, unfortunate they're not. But I think when you can get name recognition within a state like that and you're not that far away, I think it's just good for the state of Ohio, the state of Pennsylvania. Even you get into New York and you could have Syracuse and Buffalo play and you're not that far away from one another. So I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on that, just because to me I think that's very, very intriguing.
Well, there's more pressure, of course, on the big school. There's more pressure on Ohio State than there is any of the other ones coming into play. Because you lose a couple of those games, you'll probably lose your job. Those guys, if they're just respectable and stay healthy, they're happy. So that's right. I had a buddy of mine, close friend, the head coach at a Big Ten school, and he got fired after a bowl game because he lost the bowl game. So the pressure to win has changed a lot of things.
There's a friend of mine. He coaches Division II soccer, and during one of their in-season games, probably about 10 years ago, they played a Division I school, a neighboring Division I school, and they're Division II. And they beat the Division I school. And this coach is telling me, because he was friends with their coach, that coach got called in Monday morning by the president. This was on a Friday night. Got called in Monday morning by the president and the athletic director. And the president just lit into both of them and said, you just cost us millions of dollars in admission revenue because this school just lost to a neighboring Division II school, and they will use this to sell their college over us. And they were both just sitting there, and they said, you have no idea the significant damage you just cost our athletic program in their reputation.
Yep.
So I get what you're saying, too, because to them, it could be the worst thing that ever happened. And since that day, according to my buddy, they've never played ever again in soccer.
Well, and you know the story about Michigan getting beat by Appalachian State.
Sure.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess we can always dream about some of these in-state, matchups and things like that. But Ohio State, if you are listening, we'd love to see you play the Bobcats of Ohio. So I think it'd be great recognition for you guys.
What happens a lot of times in those situations. First of all, those teams are going to play lights out.
Sure.
And second of all, there's a lot of players on their first team that are really good players, and a few of them could play for the bigger school. Where they get hurt, those in depth for their second, third player is not as good as second, third player at Ohio State.
The guy I coached under at Bethany, Bill Garvey, Bill used to say, it's not about your top 22. It's about your next 44. Meaning
Absolutely.
Your next, second and third string on both sides of the ball. He goes, not your top 22. Those guys can usually compete with anybody. It was your next 44. He said that's also why, the powerhouse Division III schools are so good, because their next 44 could start at 3/4 of the Division III schools in the United States of America. So it really put that in perspective too. So, Coach, you brought it up. You're at ODU, Ohio Dominican University in Columbus. You're there 6 seasons, 5 winning seasons, 2 national playoff berths, overall record 46-21, and 2013, Coach of the Year. I believe that was it the GLIAC or the GMAC back then?
GLIAC. Yeah.
GLIAC. Okay. So can you kind of talk about, though, your time there before, it ended, and especially those national playoff teams? You can kind of walk through, what you're bringing it from NAIA to D2 and the success you had?
Yeah. First of all, this was really rewarding. That experience was much like a high school experience, taking a team and winning a state championship or something like that, because you took guys, many who had never won a championship at all, and pretty soon they win a championship. And number one is recruiting again. We did a good job recruiting. And what we did, we looked for those guys who were maybe just a little undersized for a Division I scholarship, maybe a defensive tackle that's 6'2" instead of 6'4", an offensive tackle that is maybe 6'4" instead of 6'6", and that type of thing. And maybe not a 4'4" running back, but a 4'5" running back. So a lot of evaluating talent, a ton of evaluating talent. So that was a large part of it. Guys that could grow in to that, get the extra muscle and weight and things once they got into a good weight program and stuff. And we also, believe it or not, we went to some places that were not always winning, because those places didn't get the traffic. Some other places did. And so we would go to those schools, find the best athlete in that program, bring him in, work him out, which you can do Division II. And we found a lot of good players that way. But again, selling on things. The one thing which you found Division II is that those guys came out of high school, they really didn't understand how to watch film. Mm-hmm. And so we made our players kind of give their own scouting reports on the guys they were going up against. They had to tell us about that guy. And they'd be surprised how much the guys would pick up and think about, is he in a more staggered stance if he's the defensive end? That means he's playing on a rush charge as compared to a square stance where he's playing base technique. A lot of little things about watching film and understanding the game. If you understand the game, you understand your own offense and defense better, and you understand your opponent. So there's a lot of education that way. A lot of time spent on getting bigger, faster, stronger, those things you got to do. And again, working a lot, I believe, like Coach Tressel did. It's a camaraderie thing. He worked a lot on team attitude, and we did. Our attitudes developed the whole person. Not only a great football player, but our guys had to do so much community service work a year, and all that stuff. And what I do, we told the players you're going to be a better football player than you were before you came, and hopefully you'll be a good person, even better maybe than you came here. And the third thing, you're going to get an education, you get a degree. And so we sold players on that. I'd put a portfolio together on all my seniors, which had all those things, community service, their academics, their football, and give it to them to take to a resume if they ever had that for a job or something like that. So I always believe in that old saying, if they knew how much you care about them, they'll play hard for you. And that's exactly what we did. Our coaches had to be three things. Great teachers, first of all. I don't care what you know as a coach. Do your players know that? Number one. And number two, you have to be able to be accountable for your players. That means not in trouble off the field and so and a great recruiter. A teacher, a recruiter, and if you're accountable for your players, you can be a great college coach, especially at the Division II level.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't really know a lot about D2. I think people know about D3 because you see Mount Union on TV, especially more in the Midwest and the East Coast, and everybody knows D1 and FCS. I don't think a lot of people know about Division II a lot, and really not much about NAIA, but I would tell people D2 is really good football. Like
real good football.
In Pennsylvania is great, and the teams, in Ohio, whether it's, Lake Erie football, Lake Erie Storm, or, ODU to Findlay to Notre Dame College, everywhere along the way, Tiffin, there's some really, really good football. And you get into Michigan and you get into Hillsdale for what they do. They're always really talented. I think people don't realize how good some of these Division II, teams are and the caliber of players that they get. And I think maybe now more with the transfer portal and things of that nature, you get a lot of these maybe group of 5 players going down to the Division II level because they can play, because also the transfer portal is putting a lot of the group of 5 schools right down in the FCS level. So they're going now trickling down more to Division II and high level Division II, across the board, and include Grand Valley State and those teams like that in there. So it is very, very good football. Can you guys talk about who are some of your more tougher opponents during your time when you coached?
At ODU?
Yeah.
Dominican? Well, obviously Grand Valley State. I mean, they're tremendous. I mean, you turn on the film of them, and first thing it has the big picture of their scoreboard that says, all the national championships they won. I said, oh man, I wish we could get that off there. But they were probably our number one out-of-state rival because they were so good and won so many national championships. And then in-state, Ashland. My friend and my former colleague at Ohio State, Lee Owens, was the head coach there during all that. And that was our real interstate rival. We had some great games with them. So they did a good job. You mentioned Tiffin, the guy that's the head coach now. Tiffin's a guy named Chris Reiser. He was our assistant coach at Ohio Dominican. He was a great quarterback out of Moeller High School out of Cincinnati. So he's doing a super job of Tiffin. But those guys, like you say, a lot of those players, if they were just a little bit bigger and so forth, they wouldn't even be Division II. The one thing about this whole thing now with the portal and all that is kind of really changed the whole recruiting process. For example, I think you lose about a third less high school recruits get Division I scholarships because now they'll take at least a third, maybe up to half. Some schools ain't recruit nothing but portal kids. So those one borderline Division I's now go Division II, maybe double A is what we used to call them, and have to go down a division. But again, if they play great, they can maybe then transfer up. But, man, it's a crazy process.
Yeah, and I think going off of what you're saying, because there's so much movement at the higher levels, you're getting the better players to come down, which is great because they can play and have really competitive games. There's not, I don't think, a huge gap between most Division II teams like there is with Division III. Right. But I think we're going to maybe eventually see teams like Mount Union, even really good OAC schools like Baldwin Wallace, John Carroll to Johns Hopkins to really anywhere. I mean, Wesley College, whatever it may be, they're going to just continue to widen the cap of really, really high level Division III because some of those guys are going to go there to everybody else in Division III, which, as a coach is a wide gap to begin with. Yeah. And you can't get better really as a mediocre Division III school unless you are recruiting those type of guys, because for every 2 really good high school players you get, they may get 2 transfer downs who are exceptional players.
Yep, exactly right.
So I think
at all levels.
compete. Just definitely hard like that. And if people don't know, just go look at what Mount Union's done with producing people like Cecil Shorts or Pierre Garçon, who went on, to very successful, very, very successful professional careers. But even guys at the Division II level, when you just look at somebody recently that was from Slippery Rock, their quarterback who won the Harlan Hill multiple years in a row. He came from Valdosta State and went down to Slippery Rock. So, you get guys like that. I mean, they can definitely change a whole program.
Absolutely.
So, Coach, can you kind of you talked about Major League Football a little bit in the intro, but you can kind of talk about what you're doing now in the game of football with Major League Football?
Yeah, of course, we're trying to get this thing started. It's designed to be a spring league, just like USFL, just like the XFL. Same caliber athletes, same players. Those guys come out of college, don't maybe quite make a pro team, but are good players. Guys that get cut from the NFL or the CFL. And there's a lot of players out there. You think of the hundreds of guys that get cut on the last day, for example, in the NFL. So there's a lot of players out there. And that's our ultimate goal. There's a possibility, I say a slim possibility right now, we may do a kind of a mini season, reduced number of games, even as early as this August or September. Of course, the powers to be are working on that. So that's the desire. We have right now 4 teams. There'll be 4 teams: Arkansas team, Alabama team, Virginia Beach team, and Ohio team. But that could even change. And I know we want to have many more teams before it's all over. But, that's not an easy thing to start. So you have to have a bunch of capital behind you, and you have to have television contracts and things like that. And that's what the upper echelon's working on right now.
It brings up a good point, and I want to kind of talk about this too. With the other spring leagues, the XFL, the USFL, you watch that caliber of football, and the XFL, I think, in my opinion, is a little bit higher caliber level of the USFL. I just think from the coaches that they have, and second thing is also the fans going to the game, as well. So are you guys looking then to be like that stepping stone for them to go from maybe you guys to the USFL and the XFL and then maybe potentially NFL? Or, is there dreams and aspirations to be the league that is then just below the NFL competing with the XFL and USFL for money and players and things of that nature?
The latter. Yeah, we're not here to develop players to go to USF or XFL. Our players, we want to go to the NFL.
Sure.
That's our goal. And working hard to do it. So that is the ultimate thing. I mean, for a young man that wants that last shot or that first shot, in some cases, guys just coming out of college, that's what we want to be. We'd love to be a type of feeder system, a feeder league for the NFL. That would be our ultimate goal.
Definitely can understand that. I just want to get your opinion on that. A couple weeks ago, a friend of mine and I, we went to the Italian Bowl in Toledo, Ohio. It was the Professional Football League in Italy, American Professional Football League, the Italian Football League, IFL. And they actually came to America to play in their 42nd Super Bowl. First time they ever had that in America. It was a spring league that wound up in the summer. It was really cool. There was a lot of guys who played in America and went over there just as another shot to, continue on their career. But one thing I really admired about that league, and it's a little bit different than what you guys are potentially doing, is these players didn't get paid. They worked jobs. They went over there and played for love of the game, similar to Division II, Division III players. Probably never going to go to the NFL or CFL or XFL or anything like that, but they played for love of the game, and they came over here and played for love of their country too, for Italy, in America. So I think what you guys are doing, is definitely great. Give some of these players different avenues, of that nature and stuff, because some of those guys I've seen, I was like, man, they really could be playing in America if, we had maybe another league or two for them, because I looked them up. There were some former Division II players and things like that in there. So, but I guess when you give people that chance to just continue to play, it also achieves their dreams, right? It gives them one more go around. Maybe you do get them developed for the NFL, and you could be that league. But it's definitely interesting when you can see guys continue to just play for love of the game, in any aspect, right? Because they're just not quite done yet, but they're just this far away from being in the NFL. So, definitely.
That's the pleasure of coaching. Watching young guys mature and get better, and the guys, maybe live their dream. It's tough, it's hard, it's physical. It's you're doing it, like you say, financially, it's not always easy.
Sure.
But if they make it, what a great experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely on that. So, Coach, it's definitely great talking to you. We're kind of getting near the end of the episode, here. I wish we could talk all day, but Zoom doesn't allow us to always do that. So, but before we let you go, though, we always like to give our guests about a minute for anything they want to promote, whether it's Major League Football, just a good message, or anything that you kind of want to get out there before we go. So we're going to give you about a minute or a little bit less. Anything you want to kind of get out there, the floor is yours, Coach.
Yeah, well, obviously, with the Major League Football, MLFB.com is where you go to check about that. Hopefully, we'll get things going here pretty soon. Have a great league that a lot of players can play in. Myself, I do, again, during the season, Ohio State season, I do television for Channel 4 and for WTVN radio. So I do both of those and all that. But right now, as I watch high schools practice, and if I go to a high school practice, almost every time I go, coach will want me to say something to the team because I've been around a long time. But and I think the one message I like to give young people is if you want to play football, like other sports, but really with football, you got to do more than is required to develop your skills. I said, I've never had a player ever in my entire career come back to me and say, hey, Coach, I wish I would have done less. They always say, Coach, I've been good, but I could have been better. So, live your dreams, no regrets, hard work, be a great example, a great role model, and you'll be a success in anything you do.
That's a great message to end the show on for sure. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Ride Home Rams podcast. Once again, we'd like to thank Coach Bill Conley for coming on, a legend from Ohio State himself. Coach, thank you so much again. We definitely appreciate everything you're doing for the game of football. And to all our new listeners out there, we hope you loved the show today. Be a friend, tell a friend. I'm sure they're going to love it. And if they don't, tell them anyways, because I bet they do love it, even though you may not. That's going to do it for this week's episode, and we'll see you next week.
The Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by W Energy. Energy drinks made for gamers, streamers, and podcasters alike. For gamers, streamers, and podcasters alike. Go to the link in the description where you can find the best energy drinks out there. Less caffeine than a cup of coffee. Also, no jitters and no crash afterwards. Use the promo code Mike Bono and get yourself 10% off. Also, the Ride Home Rants podcast is brought to you by my favorite sponsor of the show, and that is Shankit Golf. Golf apparel made for the everyday golfer. We might not go out and shoot a 6 under par. We're probably going to shoot a 6 over par, but this is going to give us the gear that's going to help us rock it on and off of the course. Go to the link in the bio, use the promo code Mike Bono, and get yourself 10% off there as well.